Have you ever felt like you were invisible, despite all your efforts? Like no matter what you did, you were always going to be second place to someone else? That was my life. And it wasn't until everything came crashing down that I realized just how far I was willing to go to prove I was more than just the quiet one in the background. It all started on a day I will never forget. I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from a serious surgery when I got the call that would change my life forever. My parents had sold my house, the house I had worked so hard to buy with my own savings, the house that symbolized my independence, my escape from the suffocating expectations of my family. They sold it, not because they needed the money for an emergency or because of some unavoidable financial crisis, but to fund my sister's extravagant trip to Dubai. They told me they needed to help her find herself, to indulge her dreams. She had been struggling, you see, and they were convinced that this lavish trip was just what she needed. What made it worse was that I wasn't even included in the conversation. I wasn't even given a choice. All they told me was that it would be fine. In the middle of my recovery, when I was in no position to even fight back, my parents made their decision. It wasn't just about money, it was the message they sent. The message that my needs, my dreams, and my accomplishments were worth less than the next big thing in my sister's life. At that moment, I wanted to scream, to throw my phone against the wall, but instead I just went silent. How did it come to this? How had I allowed myself to be pushed so far into the shadows? Growing up, I had always been the reliable one, the responsible one. My younger sister, Clara, was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, charming, always the center of attention. From an early age, Clara was the one who seemed to shine brightest in our family. It was never out of malice. It was just the way things were. My parents, who were always so proud of her social media posts, her beauty, and her effortless charm, rarely noticed my achievements. The accomplishments I worked so hard for were met with a quiet acknowledgement at best, often overshadowed by Clara's latest adventures, her new clothes, her ever-growing Instagram following. I was never the golden child, and I came to accept that. But there were moments, small moments, when I wished they could just see me. See me as someone more than the dependable, hard-working daughter who would never make waves. I wanted to be seen for my skills, my intellect, my creativity. But every time I tried to share my success, Clara's latest drama would take the spotlight, leaving me feeling small and insignificant. It was a pattern that repeated year after year, and I had come to believe it was just the way things would always be. But that phone call changed everything. As I lay there in the hospital, the weight of their decision hit me like a ton of bricks. I had worked so hard to buy my house, to create a life for myself that was separate from the suffocating expectations of my family. And now, just like that, it is gone. Sold without my consent, without any consideration for my feelings. And Clara, she didn't even seem to care. Her response was casual, as if she had every right to go on this lavish trip. As if my life, my home, my independence meant nothing in comparison to her next adventure. I felt betrayed, but more than that, I felt small. I was just the background character in Clara's world, a world where she got whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, without ever having to work for it. And now, even my house had become another prize to be handed over to her whims. But as I lay there, stewing in my anger, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. Not again. I realized then that I had been living my whole life for everyone else, my family, my parents, and Clara. But it was time to stop. Time to stop caring about their approval, their favoritism. Time to take control of my own life. The betrayal I felt was the spark I needed. My life wasn't going to be dictated by anyone else anymore. The house was gone, but I was still here. I was still alive, and I was going to fight to build something bigger than what they had taken from me. But how? What would be my next move? As the days passed, I realized that I didn't need to fight for their attention anymore. I didn't need their validation. I needed to fight for myself. The only way forward was to prove to myself that I could build something more, something bigger. I didn't need Clara's popularity, my parents' approval, or anyone else's acknowledgement. All I needed was me. The days of being the quiet one were over. It was time for me to make my mark. For days, I couldn't shake the anger that simmered inside me. The realization that my family had sold my house was like a punch to the gut. But what hurt even more was the financial manipulation that had been going on for years. I had worked tirelessly to build my own independence, to make something of myself without depending on my parents or anyone else. Yet no matter how much I succeeded, it never seemed to be enough. My family always had a way of quietly taking advantage of me. It wasn't just the house. It was the constant drain on my finances that they never even asked about, but always expected me to shoulder. I had been quietly supporting my family for years, picking up the pieces when their extravagant spending habits went too far. I had always assumed that helping out here and there was just part of being the responsible one. I never expected it to become a pattern, a system where my financial stability was something they simply assumed would always be there. But when my mother called, asking me to pay for Clara's shopping spree, I knew something had to change. "I don't know if I can afford it this month," I told her, trying to sound reasonable. "Oh, Sophia, it's just a few $1,000s, she replied breezily. "Clara's been through a lot. You know how she is. She's always had a lot on her plate, and now she's dealing with all this stuff with Nicholas." My stomach twisted. Clara was the one who had just gotten engaged to a wealthy businessman, living in luxury, while I worked endless hours at a job I had earned with my own blood, sweat, and tears. Yet, somehow, it was always my responsibility to pay for Clara's latest whims, to cover her bills when she overextended herself. I could feel the frustration building, but I pushed it down, as I always did. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I really don't have the extra money right now. I've been saving for—" "Save it for what?" she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Clara needs this, and you're in a good position to help her out. It's not like you're struggling. Don't be selfish." The words stung more than I cared to admit. "I'm not being selfish," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just saying, I need to prioritize my own future." "Well, Clara's future is important too, and we're all counting on you. Can you help or not?" I had no choice, or so I thought. I sent her the money, draining my savings in the process. The worst part wasn't even the financial hit. It was the realization that no matter how hard I worked, how much I earned, it would never be enough. My family had set a standard, an expectation, that I would always be there to fill the gaps. It wasn't just a one-time thing either. This pattern stretched back for years, hidden behind the pretense of family love. But it was clear now. I was nothing more than an ATM to them. They never asked how I was doing, how my work was going, or if I needed help. It was always about Clara's latest obsession, or their unspoken belief that I would pick up the pieces when things went wrong. After the house incident, the burden became even clearer. It wasn't enough that they'd taken my home. No, they needed more. Always more. Every time I came home, it was like a silent demand for me to help, to support them, even when I was struggling myself. I had never been the kind of person to ask for help, but now I was starting to see just how much my family took without ever giving anything back. But it didn't stop there. One evening, I returned from work, exhausted and ready for some peace and quiet, when my phone rang. It was my mother again. "Sophia, Clara's really struggling with her wedding expenses," she said, sounding almost frantic. "Can you help her with the catering deposit? We just need a few thousand to lock in the venue." I stood there, the words hanging in the air like a weight. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't respond immediately. Could I really afford to give them more money? The answer, of course, was no, but I knew I would, because I always did. "I don't know, Mom," I replied, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure I have that much to spare right now. The new apartment's been expensive and work is busy." "You're doing fine, Sophia," she interrupted. "You've worked hard and you deserve this. Just help us out. Clara needs this, and she's already been through so much." I felt trapped. I was constantly made to feel like my own needs didn't matter. My apartment, my career, my future, it was all secondary to Clara's endless wants. I sent them the money. Again, the cycle of financial manipulation continued, and each time, I felt smaller, more helpless. They used guilt, pressure and their expectations to get what they wanted, never once considering that I might need something for myself. They didn't see me as an individual. They saw me as a resource to be used and drained until there was nothing left. The tipping point came when I received a call from my parents, just a few weeks later. My mother's voice was shaky, and I could hear Clara crying in the background. "Clara's been upset, Sophia," she said. "We've been trying to help her, but she's really going through a rough patch. She's saying that she's feeling lost, and she might have to postpone the wedding if she doesn't get some more help." "Mom, Please, Sophia, you're the only one who can help right now," my mother said, pleading. "If you don't step in, everything's going to fall apart." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how I felt, how I was tired of always being the one to sacrifice my own happiness, my own dreams, just to keep them from falling apart. But instead, I stayed silent and did what I always did. I sent the money. That was the moment I realized something had to change. I wasn't just a silent partner in my family's dysfunctional dynamic. I was a victim of it. But I wasn't going to take it anymore. It was time to fight back. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my family's approval, but no matter what I did, I would always come second to Clara. I had to make a choice. Would I continue to sacrifice my own life? Or would I finally stand up for myself? The next time they asked for money, I didn't respond right away. I started to think about what I had lost, not just financially, but emotionally too. How had I let my family take so much from me without ever considering what I needed? I had to reclaim my life, and this time, I wasn't going to let them take anything from me. I had always known that my family didn't understand the depth of my sacrifices, but I never expected them to go this far. The house was just the beginning. What came next hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me numb with disbelief. For the first time, I realized that they didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a tool to fix their problems, a person to rely on when things got tough, and someone to exploit when they needed help. It wasn't love they wanted, it was a resource. The day I received the letter from my bank was the day everything changed. It was just another reminder that my family had crossed a line I couldn't ignore anymore. I had been busy at work, trying to focus on the projects that mattered to me, when I saw the notification on my phone. A strange charge had been made to my account, one I didn't recognize. When I opened the notification, I froze. It was a large transfer, one that emptied the account I had worked so hard to build. My heart raced as I clicked into the details. The transfer had been made to a high-end jewelry store in the city. My fingers shook as I realized what had happened. The purchase was for Clara. She had used my account to buy herself another lavish set of jewelry, a gift for herself after her latest shopping spree. I was furious, but more than that, I felt sick. I tried to call my mother immediately, but she didn't answer. I called my father. Nothing. They knew exactly what they had done, and they were avoiding me. My stomach churned with the certainty that they had sold me out yet again. For what? For Clara's whims? I didn't even have time to process it before my mother called back, her voice unusually calm. "Sophia, I know this looks bad, but Clara really needed it," she said, almost as if justifying the theft of my savings. "She's been struggling with everything, and this was just the way to lift her spirits. You're the responsible one, sweetie. You have the means to help." "Help?" I repeated incredulously. "Help? You took money from my account without asking me first. You've done this so many times, but this is the last straw. I'm done being your piggy bank." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then my mother's voice wavered. "Don't be so dramatic, Sophia. You're the one who always overthinks everything. We've helped you out when you needed it. Can't you do the same for your sister?" Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I had helped them countless times, but they never acknowledged the toll it took on me. They only took, never giving anything back in return. "I'm not helping anymore, Mom. Not like this. I've worked too hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to let you take it away from me anymore." I hung up before I could say anything more, the rage building inside me. I couldn't breathe. The anger bubbled to the surface, and all I could do was stand there, feeling betrayed. But then the phone rang again. It was Clara. "Hey, Soph," she said casually, her voice sounding so sweet and innocent. "I know you're upset, but you're really being unfair. Mom and Dad were just helping me out. I couldn't afford the jewelry, and I've been through a lot with Nicholas. He left me, remember? I needed something to make myself feel better. The guilt trip. It was always the same. Clara was the golden child, and I was the one who was supposed to pick up the pieces. Every time she wanted something, she used her charm to get what she wanted from our parents, and when that didn't work, she'd use her tears. No, Clara," I snapped. "I'm done. I'm done helping you, and I'm done helping them. You think you can use me whenever it's convenient, but that's not how it works anymore." There was a long pause before Clara's voice came through, quieter now. "You're really going to be like this? After everything we've been through together?" She sniffled, but I didn't care. "You've never cared about anything but yourself," I said coldly, "and I'm done with it." I ended the call, the weight of my decision settling over me. I knew that cutting ties with my family meant facing the consequences, but I also knew that if I didn't stand up for myself now, I would lose everything I had worked so hard to build. The next few days were the hardest I'd ever faced. My parents tried to call me, but I ignored them. I couldn't face them. Clara's wedding was coming up, and I knew they would expect me to play my part as if nothing had happened. I felt the pull of their expectations, but I resisted. I was done being the good daughter, the responsible one. But then, a few days before the wedding, my mother showed up at my door. She was holding an envelope, her face pinched with concern. "Can we talk, Sophia?" she asked, her voice strained. I didn't want to listen, but I couldn't avoid it. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She sat down on the couch, looking down at her hands before she spoke. "We need you to help with Clara's wedding. We've spent a lot on it, and there's a lot left to do. Can you help with the final costs? It's just a small contribution. Clara really needs you right now." I stood frozen, my fists clenched at my sides. They were still asking. After everything they'd taken from me, they were still asking for more. "I'm not helping anymore, Mom. I'm done. You've crossed a line and I won't stand for it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, Sophia, this is for Clara. We just need you to help one last time." I shook my head. "No, Mom. I've given enough. I'm not your cash cow anymore. You and Dad have to figure it out without me." Her face crumpled as she stood to leave. "I never thought it would come to this. You're really abandoning us, just like you abandoned the family all those years ago." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I had been carrying the weight of my family's neglect for years, and I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into submission again. As she walked out, I knew that this was it, the final straw, the moment I stopped being the person they could walk all over. I had been patient, I had been generous, but I had reached my limit. I was done. The betrayal was complete. My family wasn't the place I had thought it was anymore. The place I had spent years trying to fit into, to earn their approval, was now a toxic pit of manipulation and greed. And just like that, I had nothing left to give them. The line had been crossed. And now, the consequences would come. The days after my final confrontation with my family felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had done the impossible. I had stood up for myself. For years I had put up with their demands, their manipulations, and their endless need for my financial support. I had lived my life for them, always doing what was expected, always sacrificing my own needs for theirs. But now, for the first time in my life, I felt free. I had finally broken the cycle. However, freedom wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. The silence that followed my decision was deafening. It wasn't just the lack of communication from my family. It was the complete absence of anything resembling love or understanding from them. After years of trying to earn their affection, I realized that it wasn't going to happen. They would never see me for who I truly was. I was always going to be the responsible one, the one they could rely on when things got tough, but never the one they truly appreciated. My phone rang constantly in the days that followed, but I refused to pick up. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their excuses. They had shown me who they were, and I wasn't about to go back. Yet, despite my resolve, there was a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had spent so much time trying to make them proud, trying to make them love me, that now I was left with an empty feeling. But I knew I couldn't go back. If I did, it would only be a matter of time before they took everything from me again. It wasn't long before I realized just how deep my family's actions had cut. As I settled into my new routine, focusing on my career and my new life, I received a letter from the bank. The letter was terse, simply stating that my account had been accessed and a large sum of money had been withdrawn. My heart skipped a beat. I knew exactly what it meant. My family had taken even more. Not only had they sold my car without permission, but they had gone through my finances again, taking what they thought they were entitled to. This time, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. I called my bank immediately, asking for details. They confirmed that the transaction had been authorized by a family member, and the money had been used to cover Clara's extravagant purchases. My mother had again made a decision without consulting me, using my hard-earned savings to fund Clara's latest spree. They had done it again. I was enraged. My chest tightened as I felt the old familiar bitterness welling up inside me. It was the same thing over and over. They took, and when I finally stood my ground, they had no remorse. They never once thought to ask for my permission. It was time to act. I called my lawyer the next morning. I had reached my limit. I had spent years trying to maintain a relationship with them, trying to keep my family intact. But now, I realized that they didn't care. They didn't respect me, and they never would. I wasn't just the responsible one anymore. I was the one they saw as a resource, and it had to stop. It was time to take back control. I spent the next few days working with my lawyer, gathering evidence of the financial manipulation my family had been subjecting me to for years. I knew it would be a difficult road, but I was determined. For once, I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them continue to walk all over me. This was my chance to reclaim everything they had stolen from me, my financial independence, my peace, and my sense of self-worth. The day I finally filed the lawsuit against my parents was the day everything started to change. It felt surreal, like something I had been working toward for years had finally become reality. I had spent so long trying to make them proud, trying to gain their approval, and here I was, taking them to court. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about standing up for myself. It was about showing them that I was worth more than the sum of what they had taken from me. The process was long and grueling. My parents fought back every step of the way, their lawyers presenting every excuse in the book. They tried to twist the narrative, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who had turned her back on family. But the evidence was clear. They had used me for years, taking what they wanted without ever considering the consequences for me. The media even got wind of the lawsuit, and suddenly, my family's dirty laundry was being aired for the world to see. Clara, of course, played the victim, spinning a story about how I was jealous of her success and trying to tear the family apart. She made it sound like I was the villain, like I was the one who had betrayed them. But I knew the truth. I wasn't the one who had betrayed them. They had betrayed me first. The court case dragged on for weeks. I spent hours on the stand, explaining the years of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation I had endured. It was exhausting, but liberating at the same time. Every word I spoke, every piece of evidence I presented, felt like I was finally taking control of my story. The years of silence, the years of being overlooked and mistreated, were finally being acknowledged. The world could see the truth. Then came the moment of reckoning. The judge ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to repay the money they had taken from me, which forced them to sell their house and downsize. It was a bitter victory, and as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. This was my family, the people I had always wanted to please. But it had become clear that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I gave, they would never appreciate me for who I was. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter than it had in years. I had won, but it wasn't about the money. It was about taking back my life, taking back my autonomy. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I was finally free. The day after the court ruling, I sat in my small apartment, looking out the window at the San Francisco skyline. The city had always been a place of dreams for me, a place where I could rebuild my life and find a sense of peace. But today, it felt more like a battleground. My family, once the center of my world, was now a distant memory. I had taken them to court and won, but I knew the victory was only half the battle. The real challenge lay ahead, confronting them, cutting them off once and for all. I had spent years pouring my heart and soul into that family. I had sacrificed my time, my money, and my well-being just to keep them afloat. But now, I was done. I had to protect myself, even if it meant severing the ties that had bound me to them for so long. The phone rang, breaking the silence in my apartment. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew exactly who it was. My mother. She had been calling nonstop since the court ruling, leaving voicemail after voicemail. I hadn't picked up. I wasn't ready to face them yet. But now, I had no choice. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Sophia," her voice came through, strained and anxious. "We need to talk. I know you're upset, but you can't do this. We're family. You're breaking us apart. Please, just hear us out." I closed my eyes, swallowing the anger that bubbled up. "I've heard enough, Mom. You've had years to explain yourselves, and you've done nothing but take from me. You've used me, and I'm done." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her trying to find the right words. "I don't understand, Sophia. You're our daughter. We raised you. We gave you everything." "No, you didn't," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You gave me nothing but expectations and demands, and every time I met them, you just asked for more. I've worked my entire life to earn my place in this world, and all you did was take. You used me, and I let you. But I won't do it anymore." Her voice shook now, and I could hear the frustration in her words. "So that's it then? You're just going to throw everything away? Your family? Your sister?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what I had to say next. "I've been throwing it all away for years. My money, my time, my energy. It was never enough, and now you've crossed a line. Selling my car, taking my money for Clara's shopping spree, all of it. It's over, Mom. I can't keep pretending like this is normal." "But we're family, Sophia," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Family helps each other. We've always helped you. How can you turn your back on us now?" I felt my heart tighten, but I knew what I had to do. "You've never helped me. You've used me. And it's not just the money. It's the years of emotional manipulation, the constant comparisons to Clara, the way you never saw me for who I really am. I've had enough. I've spent my entire life trying to be what you wanted me to be, but I can't do it anymore." I could hear her sobbing on the other end. "Sophia, please don't do this. You're all we have left." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "No, you have each other. You've always had each other, but not me. I'm done." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air, the finality of it sinking in. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't trying to explain myself. I was standing firm, no longer allowing them to manipulate me into feeling guilty for their actions. "I'm cutting you off," I said, my voice unwavering. "Financially, emotionally, I'm done, and I'm never coming back." I heard her sob harder now, but I didn't flinch. "I've given you everything I had, and you've taken it all. You've broken me, and I won't let you do it anymore." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I don't know what to say, Sophia. I don't know how we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said quietly. "I've made my decision. I'm done." I hung up before she could say anything else. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or exhausted. Both, maybe. But I knew one thing for sure. I had taken back control of my life. The next few days were filled with silence. My parents didn't call again, and Clara didn't reach out either. It felt like a void had opened between us, but for once, that void didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like freedom. I spent the next few months focusing on myself, my career, and my future. I had learned the hard way that no one was going to fight for me, except for me. I wasn't going to let anyone use me again. I had a plan for my life now, and it didn't involve constantly living in the shadow of my family's expectations. Eventually, my parents reached out again, but this time, it was different. They were desperate. They had sold their house and moved into a smaller apartment, their finances in shambles. They were struggling to make ends meet, and they needed me. But I was no longer the person they could lean on. I told them, flatly, that I wasn't going to give them any more money. I wasn't going to bail them out. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their mess. This was the final test for me. I had to stay strong, no matter how hard it was. And for once, I did. I stood my ground. My family would have to learn the hard way that their actions had consequences. And as for me, I was finally free. Months had passed since I cut ties with my family, and each day I felt more liberated. It wasn't an easy transition, but I knew it was the right one. I had made peace with the fact that my family, in their own way, had never truly supported me. They had only used me as a stepping stone to fulfill their own desires, but that was over now, and as painful as it was, I was beginning to see the silver lining. I threw myself into my work with a new sense of purpose. No longer burdened by guilt or the constant need for validation, I finally felt free to explore my creativity without holding back. In the absence of family drama, my mind cleared, and I could see just how much I had achieved on my own. My career flourished in ways I hadn't imagined before. The graphic design firm I worked for recognized my dedication and drive, promoting me to a senior position within the year. The projects I once only dreamed of were now within my reach. I had become a trusted leader in my field, and my portfolio grew to include high-profile clients that spoke volumes about my capabilities. My confidence soared as I worked tirelessly to build a reputation that was all my own, no longer overshadowed by Clara's shallow antics or my family's unspoken favoritism. I finally felt like I was making my mark in the world. And the best part? I didn't need anyone's approval to feel validated. With my career on track, I turned my attention to other aspects of my life. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, neglecting my own needs and desires. It was time to focus on me. I enrolled in a photography class, a hobby I had longed to explore but never had the chance to pursue. The joy I found in capturing moments through a lens was unexpected but fulfilling. It was a reminder that I had the power to create and shape my own life, just as I had done with my career. One evening, while enjoying a quiet dinner with a few close friends, I received an email that would change everything. It was an invitation to showcase my work in a prestigious international design exhibition. The email was brief, but loaded with significance. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, disbelief washing over me. My hard work was finally being recognized on a global scale. As I prepared for the exhibition, I reflected on everything I had been through. The years of feeling invisible to my family, the countless sacrifices, the emotional toll it had all taken, none of it had been for nothing. Every hardship had shaped me into the person I was today. And now, the world was beginning to see it too. The exhibition was a success beyond my wildest dreams. My designs were celebrated by industry leaders, and I made connections that would propel my career even further. The recognition felt surreal, but more than anything, it confirmed that I had made the right choice by walking away from my toxic family dynamic. They had never seen my potential, but the world did. As the months passed, I continued to thrive. My work took me to new places, from speaking engagements to design collaborations with top-tier brands. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked daughter. I was the woman who had carved her own path, and the world was finally taking notice. I had built a life I was proud of, and though I occasionally thought about my family, I no longer felt the need to chase their approval. I had learned to trust myself and my abilities, and in doing so, I had achieved everything I once thought was impossible. In a world that had often made me feel small and insignificant, I was now standing tall, strong, independent, and unapologetically successful. I had taken my power back, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Story 2. I'm Emma Collins, and I'm 25 years old. I recently received my fine arts degree from the University of California. There are difficulties in life as a recent graduate, but my narrative is about more than just adjusting to adulthood. It's about treachery, a family history, and persevering through hardship. My mother, Olivia Collins, was the center of my world as a child, an entrepreneur and a gifted cook. She was a careful planner, in addition to being an amazing chef. She made sure I always had a safety net by intentionally designing her life. Even prior to her being diagnosed with cancer, she had guaranteed both her and my future. She put her heart and energy into building the family bakery from the ground up, and it was one of her most treasured things. She left the company to me when she died 4 years ago, so I would have something to cling to, something that would always be a part of her, Emma. This bakery is not only a company, it's our origins, our home, she would explain. There will always be a place you can call home. She fought cancer, but she never wavered in her commitment to getting me ready for life without her. She ensured that I comprehended every aspect of the company, from handling suppliers to managing employees. Her act of love was her insight, and I live with it every day. But life wasn't always easy. Before it all broke apart, my parents' marriage lasted 10 years. My father, Jack Collins, left us for someone else when I was a little child. There were just silent farewells, no theatrical altercations or courtroom skirmishes. He swiftly moved on, married Madison, a younger lady who seemed to naturally assume the roles of mother and wife. Soon after, their daughter Abigail was born. And even though I periodically went to see them, I never felt like I fit in with their new family. A son was not usually courteous but aloof, the type of stepmother who treated you more like an outsider than a member of the family. "Do you want to remain for supper, Emma?" she would inquire in a tone that said she hoped I wouldn't. In the meantime, Dad put in a lot of overtime, saying he had to support his family, a category that frequently appeared to leave me out. Abigail. They adored my half-sister, who was 10 years younger. I had witnessed Madison fawning over her, plaiting her hair, or congratulating her on each small achievement. It was difficult to avoid feeling alienated. In spite of everything, my father and I continued to have a friendly but aloof relationship. Maybe out of obligation or remorse, he gave a flat sum to cover my college tuition. It was his method of remaining active without physically being there. Since I believed it to be the most I could expect for at the moment, I accepted it without question. I had no idea that my father's ulterior intentions and my mother's careful preparations would pave the way for a catastrophe I never anticipated. The most difficult thing I have ever experienced was losing my mother. Beyond my mother, Olivia Collins was more. She gave me the confidence to go on the world and served as my cheerleader and anchor. My life fell apart 4 years ago when she died of cancer, a few weeks before I was set to depart for college. The sadness was too much to bear. A part of me seemed to be gone. I also had a hard time getting out of bed for a while. I felt numb during those initial weeks, hardly able to comprehend her absence. My father, Jack Collins, intervened at that point and provided assistance in a manner I hadn't anticipated. To help me, he, Madison, and Abigail temporarily moved into the house. I didn't examine it at the time since I was too overcome by my loss. I simply felt thankful that folks were there. Even though there had always been tension in our relationship, "Emma, we're here to support you." With a reassuring touch on my shoulder, my father remarked. Madison gave a nod of assent. Her expression was deliberately set up to appear empathetic. Despite her inquisitive gaze exploring the house like if it were a museum, my half-sister Abigail seemed to go out of her way to be kind. Their presence first provided some respite. Dad assisted with the burdensome paperwork that comes with losing a loved one, while Madison took responsibility of dinner planning and household chores. As a little diversion from the overwhelming weight of my sadness, Abigail would sit with me and talk about school and her friends. It was weird, yet somewhat consoling at the time. As summer came to an end and the day I started college drew near, I had to make a tough choice about the house. It seemed unimaginable to sell it. It was the heritage of my mother, the location she had fought so hard to get us. However, it also didn't seem like a good idea to leave it unoccupied for 4 years. Dad approached me with a suggestion at that point. One morning over coffee, he remarked, "Emma, while you're in school, how about we stay here? You won't have to worry about anything since we'll take care of the home and pay all the expenses," Madison said as she was at the stove, cooking pancakes. Everyone would benefit from it. At that time, the home will be in excellent hands, and Abigail adores this school. It seems to be a sensible fix. I concurred. Feeling thankful for the opportunity, I departed for college, knowing that my mother's home and memories will be preserved. Classes, homework, and late-night study sessions were all part of the hectic college experience. However, returning home during breaks was always like entering a new planet. A reassuring reminder of home was provided by my visits. And gradually, I became aware of something surprising. At my mother's house, the dynamics of the family were shifting. Madison welcomed me home for my first break with a homemade lunch and a kind grin. "Emma, welcome back. I prepared your favorite dish, lasagna." As though she had always been aware of my tastes, she remarked, arranging the table. My half-sister Abigail was eager to show me her most recent artwork and dragged me to her room. "Is it your opinion that I should put additional blue here, Emma?" For the first time, she would question, "Is your enthusiasm infectious?" Instead of treating me like the distant relative who came to visit sometimes, she treated me like a sister. These trips evolved into more than just a way to refuel as the years went by. They began to believe that I was a part of something greater. We would playfully argue over decorations while decorating the tree together over Christmas vacations. Madison would say, "Tinsel is so tacky." But I would chuckle and claim it was timeless. Dad would smile as though this was the family he had always dreamed of, lifting Abigail to put the star on top. We nearly felt like a real family during those warm, sincere times. Summer vacations were much more leisurely and longer. On idle afternoons, Abigail and I would eat popcorn and binge-watch movies in the neighborhood pool. I was taken aback when Madison invited me to join her book club, where we would discuss romance books and chuckle at their plot twists. Emma's observations are accurate. One evening, Madison informed her friends, which surprised me by making me feel included. Even Dad appeared to retreat from his customary reticent manner. He would come to supper with us and inquire about my lessons, really curious about my life. One evening, his voice full of emotion, he stated, "Your mother would be very proud of you." Moments like this gave me the impression that I was more than simply a guest. I belonged to the family. As time went on, my perception of Madison and Abigail changed. Initially appearing aloof and uncaring, Madison eventually took on a mother demeanor, always inquiring about my life and ensuring that I was comfortable. The home was alive with Abigail's young enthusiasm and incessant conversation, and I felt like an elder sister to her, since she was often asking for my opinion. For the first time, with every visit, the second house appeared to transform. There were hints of Madison's influence, a fresh pair of drapes and a thoughtfully placed dining table centerpiece. They were, nevertheless, tasteful, merging with the coziness my mother had fostered. We all seemed to be working together to create something that respected the past while embracing the present. By the time I graduated, I honestly thought we had established an odd but useful family dynamic. Although it wasn't flawless, it was effective. I had no idea how brittle everything was, or how easily the foundation we had established could give way under the pressure of unspoken realities. I felt as though a new chapter in my life had begun when I graduated from college. I eventually received my degree after 4 years of arduous effort, late-night study sessions, and future-focused dreams. I had secured employment at a nearby company in my hometown, and the prospect of going back to my mother's house, where I had grown up, made me feel both excited and at ease. My home, where I could finally start a job and settle down, was waiting for me. It was a sunny and beautiful June afternoon when I got home. It's the type of day that gives you hope. The cab arrived at the driveway. The sight of the house brought a smile to my face. The garden seems to be kept up nicely. However, the roses my mother had planted appeared to be a little different from the way she cared for them. Despite the minor adjustments Madison had made over the years, the house felt the same. The shutters were painted a new color, and the curtains were replaced. Everything appeared friendly, and I was eager to enter and reclaim my room. I grabbed my keys and dragged my bags up the front walk. I was eager to enter the house that had always served as a refuge for me. However, the lock refused to turn when I inserted the key. I scowled and gave it another go, shifting the keys a little. Nothing has changed. I whispered to me, confused. What on earth? And gave the door a loud knock. In an instant, her look changed from one of amazement to one of discomfort. As though she had been baking, she had on an apron that was covered in flour. Emma. Her voice was tentative as she said, "Why are you here?" I rolled my bag inside the doorway, disregarding the unease in her voice. "What are you saying?" "This is where I reside," I responded, looking around the living room, which had a little different appearance than when I had left it. A new carpeting and new furniture configurations. Before Madison could respond, why were the locks changed? From the living room came Dad. He moved stiffly, his face pallid. Abigail followed him, silent but with a frightened expression. "Emma?" Dad was clearly uncomfortable because he started massaging the back of his neck. "Let's have a little conversation at the workplace." As I followed him to the little office that had formerly belonged to my mother, my mind began to race with concerns. Her books and awards still adorned the walls, but the air seemed thick, as though the place itself knew what was about to happen. Dad turned to me, his hands trembling a little, and shut the door behind us. "Emma?" His voice was low as he began. "I have something to share with you." I could sense the pressure of his words weighing down on him as he hesitated. "Madison?" "Madison believes that I own this house." I gazed at him. Uncompress the heading. "What are you discussing?" "I inherited this house from Mom. She wills it." He avoided looking at me as he nodded. "I am aware of that. But I told Madison it was mine when we moved here, that I had given it to your mother as a gesture of goodwill following the divorce, and that it had returned to me after her death. The treachery was like a kick to the stomach. You spent 4 years lying to her. You're telling me that she doesn't even realize this is my house after you gave her the impression that it was yours?" Dad drooped his shoulders. "It didn't seem to matter to me. We needed a place to stay while you were in college. I assumed it would be short-term." I felt a wave of anger and incredulity. "Short-term? Dad, this is my home, Mom's home, and you've been residing here, are you telling me? Letting Madison pretend that it belongs to her? While you deceived both me and her." Weakly he added, "I was going to tell her the truth, but his words seemed empty. Please allow me a little time to think things out." I gave a headshake, enraged. "Dad, you've had 4 years already." Madison knocked on the door at that very time. She spoke sharply. "Is everything in there all right?" One thing was evident despite the oppressive atmosphere. I refused to allow them to carry on with this sham. Although the first few days back at home were uncomfortable, I made an effort to tell myself that things will improve. Following the altercation with my dad, I decided to remain silent for the moment. I was hoping that he would fulfill his pledge to settle the matter. However, the mood in the house changed almost instantly, and Madison's actions rapidly deteriorated. Little things were the first. Remarks that were filled with subtle barbs, yet first seemed courteous. "Emma." To be more efficient, I rearranged the pantry. "Since you've been so preoccupied with education, you most likely didn't notice." "Smiling too sweetly," she would say. And then there were mishaps. My favorite blouse was destroyed by vivid pink stains, and I discovered it in the laundry one morning. Oh no. When I approached Madison, she yelled out. She spoke in a mockingly worried tone. The washing baskets must have been messed up by me. When a residence becomes overly crowded, several problems occur. Once eager to spend time with me, Abigail now appeared aloof and distant. When I walked in the door, she rolled her eyes, and she began calling me that chick when she talked loudly on the phone with her pals. Once sharing secrets and showcasing her artwork, the younger sister now regarded me like an unwanted visitor. "It's strange that you're still here," Mom remarks. One evening, I heard her whisper, and the word hurt more than I thought it would. Madison's job of being passive-aggressive quickly escalated into open animosity. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, as I was pouring myself a cup of coffee. She had her arms crossed and her face was cold. "Have you considered obtaining a place of your own, Emma?" Her question was sharp, yet her tone was informal. "You're about to start a new job. It's time to consider living on your own. After all, you're an adult lady." I gripped the cup tightly, trying to maintain my composure. "In fact, I've discussed staying here for a bit with Dad. He doesn't mind." I briefly believed she may dispute as her lips formed a narrow line. Rather, without saying another word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen. Her deeds, however, speak louder than words ever could. The living room had been reconfigured when I woke up the next morning. My mom's favorite vase was relocated to a shelf in a dusty corner. It was not in keeping with the new style. Madison spoke those words. My anger increased when I faced her, but I made an effort to remain silent since I knew that arguing with her would only make the situation worse. The household tension was intolerable. Abigail treated me with contempt when Madison made it apparent that I wasn't welcome. Even my father, who had always been my rock, was aloof. He frequently left the home early in the morning, claiming to have business commitments, and he avoided making eye contact. I began to feel alienated in my own house. Uncomfortable silences and subtle jabs turned family dinners into a battleground. Madison would prepare enough food to feed 3 people, then pretend to be shocked when I sat down at the table with them. She would remark, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be here for dinner." Her eyes were cold, yet her tone was light. Dad would sit silently and avoid any conflict, while Abigail would chuckle at her mother's comments. I started to feel lonely as the days went by. I noticed that I was withdrawing to my room more frequently. I steered clear of the animosity that seemed to follow me throughout the home. However, I was unable to shake the oppressive feeling of betrayal even there. Madison was no longer the only issue here. It was about my dad, the guy who had watched in silence while his wife eroded my sense of myself. I made an effort to divert my attention by concentrating on my new career and getting back in touch with old pals. However, the burden of domestic stress persisted. Our delicate family dynamic was becoming more and more strained every day, and I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I was being forced out of my own life. The start of Saturday morning was abnormally quiet. There were no sounds coming from Madison's baking throughout the weekend. There was no loud music coming from Abigail's room, and there were no faint TV sounds where Dad typically watches sports. The home itself seemed to be holding its breath in the strange hush. I said, "Hello, Madison, Dad," as I padded downstairs after sneaking out of bed. However, no answer was received. Not only was the kitchen immaculate, but it had been used since the previous evening. The living area appeared undisturbed, with the couch's throw cushions placed flawlessly. Even the typical mess at the door, Abigail's footwear, Madison had lost her purse. A quick lookout verified it. There was no automobile in the driveway for Dad. I looked at my phone, anticipating a text or note announcing their disappearance. However, nothing was present. Perplexed, I called my father. It immediately went to voicemail. I scowled and made a couple more attempts before grudgingly phoning Madison. The 4th ring was heard by her. Her tone was angry and aggressive. "Emma, what do you want?" She lost her temper. In the background, there was the faint sound of waves and tropical music. "I just wanted to know everyone's whereabouts," I responded, taken aback by her tone. The home was deserted when I woke up. She chuckled, but not in a kind manner. "The cutting was nasty. We told you we were in the Maldives, didn't we? Flights in first class. Opulent resort. The process." There was mockery in her voice. "To be honest, we didn't bring it up since we didn't want you to follow along and demand payment from us." "What?" I stumbled, fury and astonishment mingling. "What are you talking about, Madison?" You walked away, silently. "Save it," she said icily. "This whole thing is over for me. Living in our home and taking advantage of us as though you own it, you are nothing more than a freeloader. I won't put up with that, but your father may. How awkward is it for a mature lady to be squatting in her own house?" She wasn't done yet, but her words were like a smack. "I want you gone by the time we return. Emma, get your belongings and go. Additionally, don't believe that you can use guilt to get your father to let you remain. He concurs with me. He simply lacks the courage to tell you himself. Your number has already been banned. Enjoy your life." Before I could reply, the line died. I just stood there for a while, the phone shaking in my grasp. The weight of the treachery struck me like a tidal wave as her hateful words replayed in my head. Then, though, something changed within me. Anger replaced the grief and incredulity. Anger that is concentrated and white-hot. I lived here, the home of my mother. I had finished being pleasant. I packed their things for the remainder of the day with a resolve I was unaware I possessed. Dad's golf equipment, Abigail's school materials, and Madison's pricey clothing. Everything was packed into bags and boxes. I made sure there was no sign of them left in the house by carefully stacking them in the garage. With everything I put away, I felt as though I was recovering a piece of myself, and every movement was therapeutic. I had contacted a locksmith by the evening. "Could you please change the locks right away?" I asked in a forceful voice. Within an hour, he was there, changing all the locks in the home while I watched, holding on to the new keys like a lifeline. I didn't care that it cost a little fortune. I had a weird feeling of relief as I shut the door behind him. Once more, this was my home, and nobody was going to take it away. After a hard day at work on Friday, I saw their car as soon as I came into the driveway. They had returned. With their boxes and bags from the garage around them, Madison, Dodd, and Abigail stood close to the front steps. Madison's hands were making frantic gestures as she shouted to her father, her face flushed with rage. Dodd wore his typical expression of silent discomfiture, and Abigail hung back, frowning. Madison's voice burst as soon as I got out of my automobile. "You have no right to replace the locks," she yelled and came charging at me. "This is our home. Locking us out is not your right." I walked quietly past them and approached the front door, ignoring her tirade. There was no sign in sight. With each stride, her voice became louder. "It's breaking and entering. We're going to call the cops. Do you really believe you can ignore us and just chuck us out?" At the door, I paused and turned to look at her. Even though her comments were poisonous, I felt solid and at ease within. "No, Madison," I firmly responded. "It's not your home. It wasn't. I own this house. My mother left everything up to her will and me. You've only been residing here because I gave me permission. I'm finished now." She screwed her face in shock. She looked at her father, who was motionless by the car. "Tell her she's lying, Jack. Let her know that this is our home." Her voice was harsh as she demanded. It was as though Dad wanted to dissolve into the sidewalk. He squirmed uneasily, avoiding my eyes, and then said, "She is being honest." Madison became enraged. "You misled me." Glaring at him, she let out a yell. "By allowing her to remain, you gave me the impression that this was your home and that you were being helpful to us. Have you not told me anything else?" She returned her focus to me. Anger and despair were mixed together in her expression. With a sudden calm, pleasant tone, she said, "Emma, sweetheart, here, we've had a lot of fun. Thanksgiving feasts, book club evenings. This house belongs to a family. We can definitely figure something out." "No," I interrupted her. "We are unable to. The garage contains your belongings. Take them and go." Madison's tone became nasty once again as her mask cracked. "You're a little ungrateful. This is how you pay us back for everything we've done for you. You would leave your own family homeless. I've never been treated like family by you." With a calm yet powerful voice, I shot back. "Additionally, don't act as though allegiance is at issue. Madison, you attempted to take my house, the home of my mother." At last, Dad came forward. His voice wavered. "Please, Emma, we are family, even if I am aware of my errors. We can solve this. Let's remain a bit longer, please." I gave a headshake. Steele met his beseeching gaze. "No, Father. You told her a falsehood. You also misled me. As you watched and remained silent, you allowed her to remove any traces of your mother from this house. I will not let you to continue doing this." Madison made one final attempt. She spoke in a desperate tone. "This is not possible. Emma, we'll fight you on this." I turned to look at them one more time before opening the door and entering. "Feel free to give it a try," I remarked simply as I firmly closed the door through the window behind me. As they packed the last of their things into the car, I saw them quarrel. Madison let out a scream. As the vehicle drove away, Abigail sobbed and Dad simply looked defeated. Something heavy came off my chest. Once more, the home was mine. Mine, really. The home was frighteningly silent in the days after they left, yet the quietness also offered a surprisingly peaceful feeling. I wasn't being cautious or anticipating Madison's passive-aggressive comments for the first time in years. Once more, the area was mine. It also brought a clarity I hadn't experienced in a while. My mother's house was no longer the only one here. It served as my haven. It wasn't easy, but it was vital for me to break off my relationship with my father and his family in order to start again. Dodd made many attempts to get in touch, phoning from different numbers and leaving voicemails containing several excuses and pledges to make up for things I didn't answer. After what he had permitted to occur, his comments sounded hollow. In one message he wrote, "I love you, Emma." I was only attempting to maintain harmony. However, peace based on deception isn't really peace. Furthermore, I was no longer prepared to sacrifice my honor for his convenience. Madison made no attempt to get in touch with me. She had expressed her emotions clearly. Abigail's quiet hurt more than I had anticipated, but I had to remind myself that she was still a young child and was affected by her parents' choices. Nevertheless, I was aware that it was best to break free from the poisonous relationships that had been a burden on me for so long. Now that they were gone, I focused on starting again. Reclaiming the house, both literally and emotionally, was the first step. I repainted the walls, put the furniture back in my mother's order, and used warm, cozy colors that brought back memories of her. I used the same hues she had adored when I replanted the rose plants in the backyard. Making the place my own work became another anchor for me, and every little adjustment seemed like a step toward paying tribute to her memory. Although difficult, my work at Marshall & Brooks Financial was rewarding, and I gave it my all, throwing myself into it. For the first time, I felt like I belonged to a community, and my coworkers became friends. Harper, a member of the risk assessment team, became a close friend, and we laughed and discussed future plans over our lunch breaks. Restoring my mother's bakery, which had been shut down since her death, was the most significant undertaking, though. The doors finally reopened after months of preparation and late nights. I was overcome with pride and a sense of belonging the first time I walked behind the counter, the aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries filling the air. The bakery was her legacy, not simply a company, and now it was up to me to continue in the silence. I frequently reflected on all that had occurred, including the treachery, heartache, and deaths. I had made a family call once. However, I didn't think about it with resentment. Rather, I viewed it as a phase in my life that taught me the value of setting limits, respecting oneself, and the strength of beginning over. Healing is difficult and not linear, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years as I stood in my mother's home, surrounded by the life I was creating. I immediately saw why my mother had always advocated for future preparation. Even when the people I trusted most failed me, she had equipped me with the skills I needed to stand on my own. I knew I was ready to go when I noticed the roses blooming in the dusk light as I gazed out into the yard. This life, this home, I owned it, and I would transform it into something lovely for her, myself, and the future she constantly wished for me to own. Story 3 is a little serene village encircled by gently flowing streams and undulating hills. I was raised in an environment very different from the bustling, glitzy life of a large metropolis. We lived in a little old house with windows framing expansive fields and groaning wooden flooring. With all of life's small pleasures and familial devotion, it seemed like a miniature cosmos unto itself. That's where my tale started. Although my parents didn't have a lot of money, they were wise and compassionate. Despite his hands being callous from years of hard work, my father, a carpenter, was always kind to us. He was more than a furniture maker. He instilled in me the value of diligence, modesty, and pride in one's job. As a schoolteacher, my mother stocked our home with books and tales. She had a talent for creating stories that inspired me to dream big and ignited my imagination. Our small village was a basic, leisurely place to live. Everyone was acquainted, and neighbors gave one another kind greetings. Our year's high points were neighborhood gatherings like the yearly harvest festival. I cherished the small things in life there, the crunch of leaves beneath my feet, the sound of bird song, and the scent of the land after a downpour. Early in the day, it was a life where simple was beautiful. I met Matthew for the first time at the municipal library. I had never known someone like him before, a city visitor. He was not arrogant. Yet he exuded a refined, sophisticated aura. Rather, he exuded a sincere warmth that made him approachable. In the business sector, his family was well known. Their riches and power extend well beyond the city's borders. Matthew, however, was surprisingly grounded, paying attention as I told them about my life in a tiny village. Our interactions were tentative at first. The way he described the city to me was like two individuals meticulously entering each other's worlds. The bright lights, the fast-paced, limitless possibilities. I told stories of my town, including the warmth of our tight-knit community and our peaceful stroll by the stream. We began getting together on a regular basis at an old park seat near the lake. The lake's placid waters mirrored the shifting hues of the heavens. Being a silent observer of our developing relationship, Matthew confided in me one evening as the sun was setting, "Lauren." His voice was quiet and unsure as he spoke. "People who worry about riches and prestige have always been around me, but I discovered something new with you. I didn't realize I needed that level of calm. You've showed me a really genuine and heartfelt way of living." His remarks had a profound effect on me. "Where we come from doesn't matter as much as who we are when we're together," I said to Matthew. "You've given me the ability to dream of things I never would have thought possible before." Matthew started talking more about his family, particularly his mother, as our connection developed. Despite her sophistication and elegance, she had great hopes for him. Although he spoke respectfully of her, there was a hint of concern in his tone. He said, "She has very specific ideas about the kind of person I should be with. I simply don't know how she will respond to us." I gave him a comforting smile while holding his hand. "We'll confront that together. Love isn't about our background or what other people think. It's about always selecting each other." Matthew's proposal day was straightforward, similar to our affection. Only a sincere pledge of a life together was made. There were no extravagant displays. I knew that our adventure had just begun when I gazed into his loving and hopeful eyes. I was really nervous the night I was supposed to meet Matthew's family, as we got closer to their opulent home. Its commanding presence made me realize how different our worlds are from one another. Matthew smiled encouragingly and squeezed my hand. "Lauren, just be yourself. All you have to do is that." Despite my heart pounding, I nodded. "All I can hope for is that your mother won't think I'm totally inappropriate." A shade of concern passed across Matthew's face as he sighed. "I'm here with you, even if Mom may be a lot. We'll overcome this." I was astounded by the magnificence around me as soon as we walked into their opulent dining area. Marion, Matthew's mother, was a tall, graceful woman with a commanding presence. Her piercing gaze swiftly evaluated me, and I briefly saw a disapproving glance. "This is the young woman my son has been mentioning." Her voice was measured as she spoke. "An intriguing decision." Matthew. I didn't even know the names of the gourmet items that were served at the lavish dinner. Always the kind hostess, Marion smiled subtly as she brought me a platter. "Lauren, I hope you're not too familiarized with these dishes. I'm sure we can set up something more straightforward if that's what you'd want." Her remark hurt, but I remained calm and said, "Thank you," in a courteous manner. "However, I'm open to trying new things." Matthews sharpened as the evening wore on. "Is that what passes for evening wear in your town?" she asked, glancing at my dress, a straightforward ensemble I had picked out with care. On a tight budget, finding nice clothes must be challenging. Even so, her remarks were intended to denigrate me. I raised my head. I thought about what Matthew had said, simply be who you are. He sat next to me, occasionally squeezing my hand beneath the table, and I could feel his quiet support. I realized by the end of the night that this was only the start of a lengthy journey. It would be difficult to win over his mother and his family in general. One thing, though, was clear to me as I saw Matthew's unwavering love in his eyes. The battle was worth it for our love, despite the fact that our worlds were so dissimilar. We were able to close the distance and build a life that was genuinely our own. Matthew quickly stepped in, his voice firm, yet calm. "Mom, that's enough. This day is about love, not judgment or status. Lauren is my wife now, and she deserves respect, just like anyone in this room." His words silenced the whispers, and for a brief moment, the room held its breath. I felt a wave of gratitude and love for him, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to stand up for myself and my family. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, addressing the crowd with as much composure as I could muster. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say something," I began, my voice steady despite the lump forming in my throat. "Love isn't about where you come from, how much you earn, or what your family's reputation is. Love is about two people finding something real and pure in each other, something that transcends all of those things." The room seemed to relax as my words sink in. I turned to Marion, meeting her gaze directly. I may not come from wealth or a prestigious family, but I was raised with values that taught me to be kind, hardworking, and respectful of others, no matter their background. I love your son, and I intend to honor and cherish him for the rest of my life. I hope in time you can see that I'm not here to take anything away from your family. I'm here to add to it. The silence that followed was deafening. Marion's face showed a mix of shock and, perhaps for the first time, a flicker of respect. Matthew's father, David, stood and started clapping, a warm smile on his face. Soon others joined in, and the tension in the room began to ease. Matthew reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly as he whispered, "That was incredible, Lauren. I'm so proud of you." The rest of the reception unfolded more smoothly, while Marion remained distant. Her biting comments ceased for the remainder of the evening. I could feel the warmth and support of the other guests, many of whom came over to offer kind words and congratulations. My parents, though initially shaken, beamed with pride as they saw me handle the situation with grace. Later that night, as Matthew and I sat together away from the crowd, he wrapped his arms around me. "Lauren, I know my mom made this hard for you, and I'm sorry for everything you've had to endure, but today you showed everyone your strength, and I couldn't be more proud of you." I rested my head against a shoulder, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but what matters is that we're together. We'll face whatever comes next, as long as we have each other." The days following the wedding brought gradual changes. Marion remained reserved, but her sharp Matthews softened over time. David, on the other hand, became a constant source of support, often reaching out with kind words and encouragement. Matthew and I focused on building our life together, determined to show that love and commitment could overcome even the toughest challenges. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself more and more at ease in my new role as Matthew's wife, while some obstacles remained. I knew that with patience, love, and determination, we could face them together. My story wasn't just about overcoming judgment or fitting into a new world. It was about finding strength and love and proving that against all odds. True connection could bridge even the widest of gaps. Matthew's father, David, looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "Grace, this isn't about punishment. It's about justice and accountability. For too long, you've taken for granted the benefits this family affords without giving the thanks or respect that should come with it. It's time for a change." "Grace." His cheeks flushed with wrath. But she appeared to grasp there was no talking her way out of this. She turned to Mr. Edward, her voice shaking slightly. "This is not possible. Everything I've done has been for this family." Mr. Edward, calm yet adamant, answered, "Then prove it. Show us that you appreciate more than appearances and position. Prove that you're prepared to give, to help the individuals that make our family strong. Like Lauren, who has demonstrated grace and strength beyond anything I've seen from you." There was silence in the room. Grace's typical serenity was broken, replaced with a bewildered and almost defeated face. For the first time, she seemed to comprehend the severity of her blunders. Matthew's hand found mine, pressing it gently as a sign of unity. His pride and affection were evident in that tiny gesture, and it gave me the confidence to speak up. "Thanks for the apology, Grace," I murmured quietly. "It's not just about me, though. It has to do with the type of family we wish to have. I'm hoping we can get over this and work together to create something greater in the future." Grace glanced away from me but nodded slightly, her face enigmatic. This was a beginning, but I knew it would take time for her to transform in a meaningful way. The tension in the room started to ease as the meeting came to a close. As the guests departed, they spoke kindly to Matthew and me. Mr. Edward stayed a while and drew me into a cozy hug. Lauren, you've exhibited more forbearance and resilience than most people in your circumstance would. I am very delighted to name you a member of our family. You belong here. I was moved to tears by what she said. Thank you, I said in a whisper. Although Grace's actions had clouded the wedding, it meant so much to hear that Matthew and I left the house that evening with a sense of closure and hope. The family's recognition of the circumstances had offered clarity and balance that seemed like a new beginning, and Mr. Edwards' bold defense. Within the next weeks, the dynamics of the family started to change. Now that she had lost her financial safety net, Grace had to face the consequences of her behavior and come up with a new plan. Although it wasn't a smooth adjustment, it tempered her edges with humility. Although our connection was still guarded, she gradually started to approach me with a hesitant regard. Matthew and I concentrated on creating our lives together in the interim. We were resolved to establish a family based on love, generosity, and respect, since the difficulties we had encountered had only made our relationship stronger. Our lives continued to be dominated by Mr. Edward. We were guided by her compassion and knowledge as we worked through the challenges of family life. In retrospect, I saw that although our wedding day hadn't gone as planned, it had marked a significant turning point in our lives. A time when Matthew and I stood together, when I discovered my voice, and when the real meaning of family was revealed. Although it wasn't the beginning I had anticipated, it was the start of a resilient, loving, and hopeful existence. The air felt lighter when Matthew and I got back from our honeymoon. Even so, there was an underlying tension as we waited to see what would happen. It was a peaceful drive. We were both thinking about Matthew's family's significant changes. Our peaceful beaches and sunsets felt like a thing of the past. His grandma, Mr. Edward, was waiting for us in the doorway of his family's house, grinning knowingly as we came into the driveway. "You two? Welcome back," she remarked kindly. She spoke lightly, but there was a gravity in her eyes that suggested the changes that had taken place while we were away. It was Matthew who spoke first. "Mom, where are you?" Looking around the home, which was familiar but significantly quieter, he questioned. Mr. Edward inhaled deeply as her grin grew softer. "Grace, however, no longer resides here. She created quite a stir after you departed and demanded that I give her money back. When I declined, she made the decision to go. She recently moved into a little apartment and, based on what I've heard, is actively seeking employment." Like a thick blanket, the weight of her words descended upon us. It was difficult to picture Matthew's mother, who had lived a lavish, carefree life for years, adapting to such a significant shift. Mr. Edward said, bending slightly as though to divulge a secret, "There's more. Everything has had a significant impact on your father, and he is thinking about getting a divorce. It appears that Grace's past behavior has finally caught up with her." Matthew's expression was a mixture of relief and horror. I didn't anticipate that. After what transpired, I knew that things would change. However, this is more than I anticipated. I put my hand on his arm and gave it a comforting squeeze. "It's a lot to process, but perhaps it's what your dad needs to find some peace and your mom needs to develop." That night, the absence of Grace's controlling presence made dinner feel oddly peaceful. It was a lighter atmosphere. The family seemed to be able to connect for the first time in a long time, and conversations were more open. As we drove home later, there was a noticeable lack of tension and real laughter. Matthew was absorbed in his thoughts. His thoughtful countenance was mirrored in the moonlight coming through the window. He murmured softly, "I always hoped things would change. However, this is not how I expected things to happen. Mom will have to make a significant adjustment." I understood his conflicted emotions and nodded. Perhaps this is the wake-up call she needs, but it will be difficult for her. It can also be an opportunity for your dad to start over. He leaned back against the seat and moaned. "It's peculiar. A part of me is relieved, and another part is sorry for her. It seems as though the family is at last having the opportunity to start over on a more solid basis." The drive home was introspective, with our minds racing with potential futures. The family we had left behind before to the honeymoon was not the same as the one we were going back to. Even though Grace's departure was challenging for everyone, Matthew seems to have been relieved of a significant load. Over the following few weeks, it was an opportunity to witness his father and grandmother finally find peace after years of stress. Grace's departure's repercussions became evident. She had started working part-time, something she hadn't done in decades, but she was having a hard time adjusting to her new reality. Although it was a modest step, it suggested that things might get better. David, however, appeared more relaxed, concentrating on re-establishing his relationship with his kids and achieving stability in his own life. Through it all, Matthew and I were there for each other. The difficulties we had encountered together only strengthened our relationship, and we felt prepared to face whatever was ahead. We drew strength from the love and togetherness we had discovered on our honeymoon. When we were sitting on our porch one evening, watching the sunset, Matthew turned to face me thoughtfully. "My mom, you are aware of everything that has occurred, including the drama surrounding the wedding. I've come to appreciate how fortunate I am to have you in my life. Everything you've done has been done so gracefully. Without you, I'm not sure what I'd do." The warmth of his words made me smile. "We've already been through a lot, Matthew, but it's only strengthened us. As long as we're together, we'll be all right no matter what." Though uncertain, the future no longer seemed overwhelming. Even while it was challenging, change has made room for something greater. A family on the road to recovery, a life based on love and perseverance, and a couple getting closer. Matthew and I were prepared to face whatever was ahead, certain that we could handle it. Hand in hand,